on it and thinking about it, and I can't turn them loose. So I'm giving y'all one this morning from me to you. You can ponder upon this. Thinking about all the people and their New Year's resolutions and everything, and you know, a lot of people, their goal for the year is to lose weight. And I thought the Apostle Paul said bodily exercise profiteth little. All right, a little time went by, and I thought, well, the Bible also says God has our days numbered. Now, I believe with some careless and reckless living, we can subtract from that number, come to premature early demise. But can we do anything to add to the number that God's already numbered? Exercise, diet, I don't know. Can we add to what God's already... And that's plagued my mind all for weeks now, pondering upon that. But anyway, got nothing to do with our lesson today. Take your Bibles this morning. Let's turn to Judges chapter 5. We'll continue on here with Deborah and Barak, and we ended last week chapter 4. Deborah and Barak defeating Sisera and Jabin and releasing Israel from the severe torment at the hands of the Canaanites, and Jael and her handy hammer work in bringing Sisera to his demise. Now, chapter 5 is, the whole chapter is, many people refer to it as a Song of Deborah. The Bible's very careful here, right off the bat, verse 1, to tell us that this is Deborah and Barak. So let's begin here in chapter 5, verses 1 and 2. Then sang Deborah and Barak, the son of Abinoam, on that day, saying, Praise ye the Lord for the avenging of Israel, when the people willingly offered themselves. So the victory that God gave Israel over the Canaanites and the way they had went about it, the result of it, brought Deborah, and let's give credit where credit's due. There's no indication here that Barak had to be goaded into it or pushed or anything, but singing praises, singing the praise to God for what he had done to Israel. And that reminded me of Proverbs chapter 29, verse 6. It basically says, the sin of an evil man, there is a snare, but the righteous man will sing and rejoice. Is there a song in our life? Do we magnify? I mean, when we're out in public and around other folks, around other people, somewhere outside the walls of our church, do we magnify and exalt the Lord with his praise for many mighty, wonderful things that he's done for each and every one of us? And maybe he's not moved in earthquakes and floods and by many of the great miracles that we read about in the Bible, but when we lay our head down at night and have our prayer time in the evening time, do we spend 1 minute just pondering back on the day that we just had and thinking about all the different things the Lord done for us just through that one day? And then thinking about that, giving Him the praise, thanking Him for it. And like I said, when we're out in public, sharing that with folks around us that God's exalted and magnified before them, and they too can know and see, the many mighty and wonderful things that God does for each and every one of us every day. And that's what faith is. We all know God can create the earthquakes when the time was needed. He can create the floods when the time was needed. But where we falter, where our faith sometimes runs into a roadblock is, will God do that for me? And the answer to that question is, yes, He will, if need be. God will move heaven and earth, move mountains for us. Jesus said if you just had the faith of a mustard seed, and any of us that's ever gardened know the nuisance that a mustard seed is, of trying to plant them a little couple inches apart in a straight little row, and you can barely see them, let alone get them planted. But Jesus said that's all the faith it takes, and God will move mountains for you. And so Deborah and Barak here go on talking about the Lord avenging Israel, and they mention the people willingly offering themselves. Well, for that army to gather, there had to be a leader. I mean, armies just don't gather and go off on their own. There had to be a leader. And we know from last week's lesson that was God calling Deborah to function as a judge over Israel. And when, however, God called Barak, the push that he needed to step up to the plate and respond to what God had called him to, was Deborah urging him on. But when leaders lead, this is just another one of those reminders as we begin here in this study in the book of Judges, that people need good, strong leaders. And especially in today's world, what we need, this country needs some strong spiritual leaders. I mean, we're sadly lacking in godly wisdom in our leadership. And it's one of the reasons why they can't actually accomplish. I mean, they do a lot of mouthing, running their mouths, and they make sure they never miss a photo opportunity. But what are they actually doing? Are they accomplishing anything good for the nation, for the American people? I mean, how else do you explain a president giving up a secured military base to execute a withdrawal from a nation and do it at a public, unsecured airport? The result is our American service people needlessly being killed. We're sitting in shock, watching in just sheer shock as human beings are falling from the wheel well of this aircraft that they've hung on to, clung to, as it climbed hundreds of feet in the air. I mean, it was a debacle, and there's no other word to describe it. But it's all because they're all doing what they think they're doing, but they're doing it without God's blessing.
Right.
And they're certainly doing it without any forethought or prayer to God's leadership. And that's just one example. Look at everything. I mean, the crime running rampant in the streets of the country. I was thinking about here, you know, we've talked about how the children of Israel were so prone to wander towards the false gods of Baal and Ashtaroth, and it hit me. I mean, the sexual immorality in our country is run amok. There's no regard whatsoever. I mean, especially in the generation below us and on down. I mean, there's no regard for it whatsoever. And then I remembered, oh yeah, you know, they replicated the arches, the entrance to the Temple Baal, and they erected one in New York City, the center of our nation's finances.
Right.
And they put up another one in Washington, D.C., the center of our nation's governance. And these gods of sexual immorality, we're wondering why it's run amok in this country. We're honoring. I mean, we have come to the place where we are literally not just tolerating anymore, but people are honoring and worshiping Baal and Ashtaroth here in the United States of America today. Now, one thing leadership requires, you can't be a leader unless you can find some people that are willing to follow. And here, I mean, through the rest of this study, I'll just refer to Deborah to save time, having to say Deborah and Barak every time this comes up, but I don't want to leave him out because the Bible included him as part of this. They recognized and gave credit to the children of Israel who were willing to step in and follow her and Barak to the battle, who were willing to fight. And that reminded me then of Romans 12:1, where Apostle Paul told us to present our bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable. And I think the last few words of that verse are the most important part of that passage. Not that we're to present our bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable. Paul sums it up as saying, that's just your reasonable service.
Yes, amen.
And Deborah was giving credit to the children of Israel. You know, she told Barak, just take an army of 10,000 men. And you might think, well, it may have trouble finding 10,000 that are willing to step up and follow him into battle. But they did. The ones that were challenged, the ones that were encouraged to step up and to join them in that fight, stepped up, and they did. And that's something we need so desperately today, is for the people who are called by God's name to step up. There's a battle that's still going on, a fight that's still going on. You know, God's not in any way, shape, or form in a state of peaceful coexistence with Satan. That battle's still going on, and he's expecting us to step up and to engage, to become part of that battle plan. And, you know, for some of us, that might not mean anything more than the prayers that we can offer up each and every day for our churches, for our nation. For others, publicly speaking out on the sin, the debauchery that's so readily tolerated and accepted by people today. God may call some of us to step up into positions of leadership. You know, I don't know why Christians think it's such a horrible thing to think about getting into politics if that's what God's calling us to be. I know it's a den of snakes, and you probably would leave the Capitol building every day thinking I need to shower in gasoline to get the filth and the stench off of me. But it's not going to ever get fixed if God's people don't step up and respond to the challenge that's being issued that's out there today for us to engage in the battle, in the fight. Look now, verses 3 through 5. We'll try to move through this. I'd like to get through chapter 5 today. Hear, O ye kings, give ear, O ye princes. Even I will sing unto the Lord. I will sing praise to the Lord God of Israel. Lord, when thou wentest out of Seir, when thou marchest out of the field of Edom, the earth trembled, and the heavens dropped. The clouds also dropped water. The mountains melted from before the Lord, even at Sinai from before the Lord God of Israel. Well, Deborah's recalling the events of the battle that they'd just won. She's retelling the story, and she's challenging the leaders of Israel, the kings, the princes, to retell. And that's how they did history in those days. It was by oral tradition, retelling the story of what God had done, how he had helped them, what he had done for them, over and over, each and every successive generation, repeating and retelling the marvelous works of God. And here Deborah's recalling the events of how not Barak and the army, but how God gave the victory, how he delivered. He said he would deliver them into Barak's hand, and he delivered Sisera and Jabin into their hand, and they defeated the Canaanites. I mean, Sisera came out with, remember, 900 chariots of iron and probably his whole army. And I'm going to guess the 10,000 that Israel had in his army. It never tells us anywhere here what the number of them was in compared to Sisera's army, but I bet you they were outnumbered. I guarantee you Sisera's army outnumbered Israel's army, in addition to the 900 chariots of iron and the horses that they had. And so remember, we asked last week, well, we knew it was by the hand of God, but how did Barak and the small force that he had defeat this army that had overwhelming odds against him? Well, it doesn't exactly say in chapter 4, but here in Deborah's song, she tells us. One, it says the earth trembled. Well, God sent an earthquake. And you can imagine what that did to all those horses as the ground began to shake and tremble under them, and they began to panic, and horses taking off in every direction, and the chaos and confusion that all of that would cause. Deborah tells us here the second thing that God did was He opened up the heavens and it poured. It come a torrential downpour, a rain. Now, what do you think happened to these heavy iron chariots? In all the pictures I've ever seen of them, they had these narrow little wheels. When these fields, when they got down to the valley here to do battle, and these fields are just turned to mud. Those chariots were all, whatever effect they might have had under normal circumstances, God nullified that. They become stuck, immobile, nothing. I mean, they were of no advantage whatsoever to Sisera, as they were all bogged down in the mud. And later in this song, we'll even see when we get there, Deborah made reference to the river Kishon becoming so swollen, I picture it flooding, and it says it swept some of them away, wiped them out, gone, washed down the river. So, Deborah's being careful here as she's going through this, praising and thanking God, giving Him the credit.
Yes, amen.
I mean, nowhere in here is there any bragging or arrogance taking place. She knows it was by the hand of God that victory was won, and it was God alone that delivered Sisera and Jabin into their hand. Now let's see kind of what life was like for Israel before that battle. Look in verses 6 through 8. In the days of Shamgar, the son of Anath, in the days of Jael, the highways were unoccupied, and the travelers walked through byways. The inhabitants of the villages ceased. They ceased in Israel until that I, Deborah, arose, and I arose a mother in Israel. They chose new gods. Then was war in the gates. Was there a shield or a spear seen among 40,000 in Israel? So Deborah's describing here what life was like for them before this battle took place. You remember last week we were told how harshly, how severely the children of Israel were treated by Jabin, king of the area there. And Deborah here's given some description of just what life was like for them. The highways, the public travel ways, were unoccupied. Life was so dangerous for the children of Israel that they did not move upon the public roadway. It's hard to think about, but they did have paved roads in those days. Yes. Not blacktop, but they would be paved with stone so that they had fairly smooth paths to travel on. But because of the safety of it, bandits, thieves, just much of the anti-Semitism that we see today against the children of Israel, it was unsafe for them to be out in the open. And so because of that, they were forced to walk, Deborah calls it the byways here. They had to take alternate routes, probably we would think sneaking through the woods on some rough, rugged, slow kind of terrain, and making sure they weren't spotted or seen, always having to take the long way around if they had to get from point A to point B. And she goes on to describe it here as the village life ceased. normal life for an Israeli did not exist, even in their villages. They were treated harshly. They exacted so much tribute from them. Just people out doing normal, everyday things had come to a stop. They probably didn't have markets or people taking things to a market to sell, and just everyday normal activities had come to a complete stop. Now, Deborah talks here about even I, and becoming a mother of Israel. I don't sense or pick up here that in any way, shape, or form she's bragging. She's simply saying that she recognizes that God used her.
Yes.
And again, this is another one of those common people. There was nothing special that we find out or know about Deborah before God's call to her. And I guess, she was a prophetess. And in a different manner, traditional way, the Bible kind of indicates that she judged some matters in her area there. And now we find out she's a songwriter. But common, everyday person as she was, God used even her, and she recognizes that, and she's praising Him, thanking Him for what He done. Now look here, here's something really, really important. Gosh, I wish you had a mountaintop to get on top and scream this to the nation today. Before the battle here, Deborah said there was not a shield or a spear found among 40,000. Why was that? Jabin had disarmed him, hadn't he?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, let's see. What's the government's answer for about everything on the agenda today? Disarming the people of the nation. Why would our government want to do that? Because they would have the same kind of tyrannical control over us then that Jabin had over the children of Israel. If people have the ability to rise up and defend themselves, if the time and circumstances call for it, you're a helpless people. And don't for 1 minute ever think that there's anything about your safety or anything that this government gives one whit about. Disarming you is their goal. And their plan is so that they have complete, total control over you. Look at verses 9 through 12 now. My heart is toward the governors of Israel that offered themselves willingly among the people. Bless ye the Lord. Speak ye that ride on white asses, ye that sit in judgment and walk by the way. They that are delivered from the noise of archers in the places of drawing water, there shall they rehearse the righteous acts of the Lord, even the righteous acts toward the inhabitants of his villages in Israel. Then shall the people of the Lord go down to the gates. Awake, awake, Deborah, awake, awake, utter a song. Arise, Barak, and lead thy captivity captive, thou son of Abinoam. So Deborah says here her heart is with the leaders, with the people of Israel. And as before, she's urging them to go to the public places and tell the account, share the account of the marvelous, mighty things that God has done for them that day, Share that with successive generations. We don't want another generation coming up that the Bible's going to describe as not knowing the Lord. How do we do that? We share the mighty things that God has done for them, with them, so that they grow up knowing, believing, and trusting in Him. But again, good leadership, strong spiritual leadership. Now, I thought about this for a little bit, and when we select our leaders, we used to do it at the ballot box. Now we just mark the box on the paper and poke it back in the mail. Does the spiritual condition of those that we vote for matter to us? Or is party, winning as a party, is that the only thing that matters to us? Having an idea or knowing a relationship that that candidate has with the Lord. Does that matter to us? Is that guiding the way that we vote today? And here's a tough one. I got to tell you, for me, this is a tough one. And I know the Bible tells us to do it. Once a person is elected, whether we like them or not, do we pray for them? Lift them up in prayer. Seek godly wisdom, godly leadership for them. Ask God to somehow steer them and direct them back to the old paths. The old ways that's going to turn this country around, hopefully one day turn us back to the ways of the Lord. Does any of those kind of things matter to us anymore? Look now, verses 13. I'm convinced that's like an extra strong battery or something in that clock. It runs way too fast.
Amen.
Look now at verses 13 through 18. Then he made him that remaineth have dominion over the nobles among the people. The Lord made me have dominion over the mighty. Out of Ephraim there was a root of them against Amalek. After thee, Benjamin, among thy people, out of Machir came down governors, and out of Zebulun they that handled the pen of the writer. And the princes of Issachar were with Deborah, even Issachar, and also Barak. He was sent on foot into the valley. For the divisions of Reuben there were great thoughts of heart. Why abodest thou among the sheepfolds to hear the blessing of the flock? For the division of Reuben there were great searchings of heart. Gilead abode beyond Jordan, and why did Dan remain in ships? Asher continued on the seashore and abode in his breeches. Zebulun and Naphtali were a people that jeopardized their lives unto the death in the high places of the field. So to kind of briefly repeat what Deborah just did there, she's praising some of the tribes of Israel that joined in the battle and helped. Ephraim, Benjamin, Zebulun, Issachar, Naphtali. And she's putting to shame some of the tribes who didn't help. Reuben, Dan, and Asher. I think what we keep being reminded here is that there is a place for the church in today's battle against evil. And there's a place in every church for every member to step up, join in, and help in any and every way that God may have called you with the gifts and the talents, the abilities that He's given us. Look now at verse 19 through 23. The kings came and fought. Then fought the kings of Canaan in Tanakh by the waters of Megiddo. Where have we heard about the valley of Megiddo? Warfare from the beginning of Israel's conquest of Canaan, that has been historically a famous place for those battles to have taken place. But by the waters of Megiddo, they took no gain of money. They fought from heaven. The stars in their courses fought against Sisera. The river of Kishon swept them away, that ancient river, the river of Kishon. O my soul, thou hast trodden down strength. Then were the horse hoofs broken by the means of the prancings of their mighty ones. Curse ye Meroz, said the angel of the Lord. Curse ye bitterly the inhabitants thereof, because they came not to the help of the Lord, against the mighty. So again, Deborah here goes back to the idea that this battle was fought from heaven. God called man to do it, but we've got to understand, God doesn't need us. He doesn't have to have us. But it's in His perfect plan and will that He gives us the opportunity to join in with Him and to share in these victories. And so much different for us today than it was for those in that day. Think about the victories He's already won for us. Sin being nailed to the cross. Eternal security with Jesus Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. The power that we as Christians have over the temptations of the devil and sin in our life. I mean, so many wonderful things God has already done and made us victorious along with Him in it. But Deborah says, God, just as He said, God delivered the victory to her and Barak, to the Israelites. And here's this river Kishon, the rain swelled that river. Now one more thing, we're getting way short of time to chase rabbits here. Have you read lately, they found underground oceans that contain more water than all the oceans on the surface of the planet? So when we're reading about Noah's flood and it talks about the water springing up from the deep, it wasn't just rain. God brought that ocean to the surface.
Yes.
And we're just now finding out that, well, here's one more thing the Bible's been right about all along.
Praise the Lord.
But the rains swelled the river Kishon, the torrent of that flood, the Bible here says, swept much or most of Sisera and his army away. And Deborah declares a curse upon a city of Meroz, because apparently they sat idly by and just watched. They had a challenge and an opportunity to join in with the Lord in this battle, and they chose not to. Let's hurry now. The rest of this is pretty self-explanatory, but we want to go through it. Verses 24 through 27. Blessed above women shall Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, be. Blessed shall she be above women in the tent. He asked water, and she gave him milk. She brought forth butter in a lordly dish. She put her hand to the nail, and her right hand to the workman's hammer, and with the hammer she smote Sisera. She smote off his head. When she had pierced and stricken through his temples, at her feet he bowed. He fell. He lay down at her feet. He bowed. He fell where he bowed. There he fell down dead. The mother of Sisera, that's the next passage. So Deborah here makes reference to Jael, recognizing her, recorded in the Bible for all history, all humanity. She is to be declared as the most blessed among women. Now that knocks a lot of them off their pedestal.
Yes.
But the Bible's very clear here. She's to be regarded as the most blessed woman ever. And it recounts here the killing of Sisera. And I ran into it in studying for this. You know, the Christians and those are all upset at Ehud and how he had assassinated Eglon. Well, I didn't last week, but didn't get ready for this. We had maybe more outrage over Jael and her killing Sisera in her tent because of the old traditions of an invited guest into your abode was to be treated with the highest of respect. They were to be given the best you had available to give, and to invite somebody in and to kill them that way, that was like almost an unpardonable sin to these folks. But let's not forget, get caught off here. Obeying and following God's will and leadership in your life is far more important than following man's tradition.
Amen.
And that's what they're all upset about. She didn't follow man's tradition. And I wondered last week, did she do it with one fell swoop, or was it a tap, tap, tap? Reading this, it sounds as if he tried to get up while she was doing this. And she finished what she started. And as he got up, he bowed and fell. That struck me. He fell dead at her feet. So maybe there's more to that. After they found out, as Deborah and Barak began this song of praise, than what we just read about or thought about in chapter 4. Look now at verse 28. I'll go ahead and read through verse 31. The mother of Sisera looked out at a window and cried through the lattice, "Why is his chariot so long in coming? Why tarry the wheels of his chariots?" Her wise ladies answered her, yea, she returned answer to herself. Have they not sped? Have they not divided the prey? To every man a damsel or two. Pay attention to that verse. To Sisera a prey of divers colors, a prey of divers colors of needlework, of divers colors of needlework on both sides, meat for the necks of them that take the spoil. So let all thine enemies perish, O Lord, but let them that love him be as the sun when he goeth forth in his might. And the land had rest 40 years. Well, even after this great victory God gave Israel over Sisera, Jabin, and Deborah's having some compassion for Sisera's mother. Talk about how she looks out the window, waiting for her son to return from the battle, and finally figuring out why it's been so long and he's not come back. He didn't make it. He didn't survive. But Deborah, for another mother, has some compassion for her. Now, I was kind of upset here as it talked about the spoils of war. If Sisera had won, that one statement there, to every man, how many thousands did Sisera have in his army? To every man a damsel or two? What would have happened to the young Jewish girls had this not been a battle led by God, and they would have won? It's horrible to think about. And yet the news doesn't report this October 7th attack by Hamas into Israel. Our news won't report it. They found rooms of teenage girls stripped naked, raped, and killed. And I think about all these college kids out there protesting against Israel, demanding Hamas and Gaza be released. Which one of them girls would take the place of one of those Israelite girls? But it's horrible to think about, but the spoils of war. Now, to love God, we've got to finish up here. To love God is to hate his enemies. Do you hate? Do you literally hate the devil? Hate his tactics and his ways? Hate the way he lies to and deceives people to trap them in his snare? Oftentimes I think we can tell more about a person when we look to see who their enemies are than who their friends are. But I think one thing that stands loud and clear here, and Deborah makes this abundantly clear in this last statement here about those that love God, letting the sun shine. To those of us that love him, we have a light. And we're way past time that we keep it hid under a bushel. When we let that light shine, that's Christ in us, that's Jesus working in and through us, that people, when they look at us, they should be seeing him, that light. When that light shines, then we simply have to take the basket off, and it will shine. It magnifies God, exalts him before this lost and dying world. It declares, look what a marvelous work he's done in that person. Why don't I have what they have? Thanks for being here this morning. Well, I pushed the clock right up to the edge there. I almost have to get to him.